Hello, all, and welcome to this afternoon's beer review, which I am dubbing the another lazy Friday beer review. So, just another lazy Friday in which I do nothing but a few chores and just spend the rest of the day idling because it's cheap, I suppose, and I have no life other than making these reviews, I suppose. So, what are we reviewing today? Well, as you know, I like sours, and I saw this, so I kind of had to get it. And this is from Lagunitas. It's from their Woodshop series. I don't exactly know much about this, but I believe it's basically for beers that have been aged on wood and, aged in barrels. And this is called Sonomica, and it is a sour farmhouse ale aged in Sonoma red wine barrels. Now, how long it's been aged, I don't know. Let's go and read the fine print on this, shall we? This pleasantly tart sour ale was aged in red wine barrels from our Sonoma County neighbors, along with the always beguiling Brettanomyces, resulting in 100% barrel-aged bliss. Smooth, funky, finely aged, and finally ready to share. Life is uncertain. I'm gonna have to get glasses soon. So I've actually let this sit out. I took the bottle out about 20 minutes ago, so that's why it's covered with carbonation. And that's because my initial taste test of this, I found it straight out of the fridge, very closed up, and it did not open up at all until quite a bit later. Um, so yeah, that's just something right there. That this one has to be served fairly warm for a sour. Usually, sours are kind of chilled, I find. They're better when they're kind of chilled. This one, way too closed up, especially on the nose, with it like that. So, this is 8.2 ABV, fairly strong. So it's got Brett in it, as you know, big old funky yeast. Without further ado, let's go and pour this into the tulip. Doing a fairly high pour here because I found the initial one didn't create much head either. So, an opalescent yellow-orange, almost red tones to it, with a fizzy, quickly receding white head. That is redolent of red wine. Now, I'm not so much a wine drinker, so I can't go and identify, you know, wine varietals just by nosing it. I know some people can. I cannot. But definitely red wine, Brettanomyces funk, very deep, almost sake-like funk. Sweaty sock-like funk. Leather, oak. Um, if I'm to be honest, almost like a urine-like note, kind of like ammonia kind of smell. At least that one's not strong. Yeah, not so much like a urine-like note, like a hot restroom note. Like a. I'm not sounding it. I'm not making it sound too good right now. But suffice to say, the top note is really dominated by the red wine. It's just kind of like, that's a really funky note over there. Okay, on to the palate. Big juiciness. It's almost like cider-like notes in the front. Cider or perry-like notes. Red wine kind of explodes in the mids and into the finish. Light hints of oakiness in the long finish. And also Brettanomyces funk in the long finish. Both the funk and tartness are fairly subdued. They're there with basically throughout, but really show up the strongest in the long finish. It's not really, I wouldn't say that there's really any strong notes that really stand out here other than the red wine. What I do find nice is that the kind of weird, really weird off notes in the nose don't really carry through onto the palate, thankfully. So it warms up, it's getting a little bit more sour, but it's not really tongue-scorchingly sour. Definitely leans more towards the sour side than wild ale side, especially when you add on that red wine aspect. One thing to note is that the ABV is very well hidden here, to the point that it's really kind of difficult to suss out. You wouldn't know if it's you'd obviously guess that it's not light, but anything between like 5.5 to 9.5 really, it really hides it well. It really hides the alcohol well within the profile here. Really wish the head kind of like stayed a little bit more with this. From reading the other reviews, there's a lot of mixed reviews on this beer. Some people really love it, and some people can't stand it, and it doesn't seem to be really related to like one's. It's only slightly correlated, I would say, with one's like take on you know Brett-based beers, sours, and whatnot. It seems like there's some. So they release this every now and then. There's some difficulties with consistency within the batch, and I don't think you can really aim for full consistency with something as you know craft as this. You're not going to get the same wine barrels every year, and Brett is notoriously difficult to go and keep tamed. So, what can I say about this beer? Well, it's interesting enough. I don't think you're probably going to find, this was only about $14 for the 4 pack in Hawaii, so I don't think you're going to find, a barrel aged sour at that reasonable a price. It would usually be about $20 for a bomber or so, import bomber. So you can't beat Lagunitas on price. I would say that there's some quirks to it. I'm not going to say flaws, because especially with this kind of style, it's like, say, consistency is really difficult, and some things that some people don't like, others may like. So one caveat is I found that this one, you really have to have it pretty warm, otherwise it's like, it's just so closed up on the nose, so closed up on the palate when it's cold. It really doesn't express itself well until you get to almost wine serving territory there, at about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The other thing is, there, I found that there were some, notes in the nose that I found a little bit too much for my own taste, which is kind of saying a lot considering how tolerant I am of funkiness. That said, it is not enough to go and dissuade me from drinking this and enjoying this. It's just something, your mileage may vary, or your lack of mileage may vary, as it were. You know? And I like these really experimental things that push the limits of craft. And I'm glad Lagunitas is out there doing it for the West Coast, because a lot of the larger brewers, I don't think, really are pushing that envelope anymore, especially go out there and look at shelves and like umpty million renditions of IPAs. So I like it that, somebody's still, pushing the edge there, doing things a little bit differently. So who would I recommend this for? Maybe somebody who's more of a wine drinker. Just kind of get them interested in a beer, since there's very much a wine-like profile. I would say that the wine profile is sort of the dominant taste note there, and with the Brett funk and the sourness kind of being peripheral, at least on the palate. I know there's some really funky notes in the nose there, like I've already mentioned. And yeah, definitely not for someone who doesn't like funky beers, who doesn't like sour beers. I know some reviews have said, "Oh, this is a great introduction." I would disagree. I would go for something like Sierra Nevada's sours for a gentle introduction in that regard. And I don't know. I don't know what would be a good gentle introduction in regards. Well, maybe this would be a good gentle introduction to Brett beers, since it's not really funky. It's not really in your face on the palate. It's sort of subdued on the palate. So maybe if for an introduction to Brett, not so much for an introduction into sours. But it is nice to go and see a sour that is, doesn't have that telltale kettle sour note of sweet tarts. So, Sonomica from Lagunitas, an interesting beer with some caveats. That is your beer review for this afternoon. Cheers, folks.